In 1976, Apple Computer didn't look like the most valuable company in the world. It looked like a gamble. Two young men working out of a garage, soldering circuit boards by hand, selling a computer that most people didn't even understand yet. The Apple I wasn't sleek. It wasn't powerful by today's standards. And in parts, it cost less than $1 to manufacture. Yet somehow, that $1 idea would become the foundation of a $3 trillion empire. This isn't a story about technology. It's a story about perception, control, and one of the most disciplined business strategies ever executed. Apple's earliest breakthrough wasn't engineering brilliance. It was positioning. In the late 1970s, personal computers were tools for hobbyists. They were complicated, ugly, and intimidating. Apple did something radical for its time. It didn't sell computers as machines. It sold them as experiences. The Apple II didn't win because it was the fastest. It won because it felt friendly. Color graphics, simple design, a sense that this machine belonged in your home, not a laboratory. That single idea, technology should feel human, would quietly shape everything Apple ever built. But Apple's real turning point didn't come from hardware. It came from control. Most tech companies licensed their software, outsourced their manufacturing, and chased short-term growth. Apple did the opposite. It insisted on owning the entire stack: hardware, software, design, and eventually, distribution. That decision slowed Apple down in the short term, but it gave them something no competitor could easily copy: absolute consistency. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was weeks from bankruptcy. The product line was bloated. The brand was confused. Apple wasn't special anymore. Jobs didn't try to fix everything. He cut almost everything. Dozens of products were eliminated. Entire divisions vanished overnight. Apple went from chaos to focus. 4 products, 1 philosophy, no compromises. That discipline became Apple's greatest weapon. Then came the iMac. Bright colors, clean lines, no floppy drive. Critics laughed, customers didn't. Because Apple wasn't asking users what they wanted. It was showing them what the future would look like and daring them to follow. That approach would define Apple's most profitable decisions. But the $1 product that truly changed everything wasn't a computer. It was a song. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod. At first glance, it was just another MP3 player. Expensive, limited storage compared to rivals, locked to Apple's ecosystem. Analysts called it overpriced. They missed the point. Apple wasn't selling hardware. It was selling simplicity. One scroll wheel, one cable. One seamless connection between music, software, and device. Then Apple did something even smarter. It turned digital music into a micropayment economy. Songs that once felt disposable now had a clear price: 99 cents. Cheap enough to feel insignificant, expensive enough to scale. That pricing logic, small amounts, massive volume, would become the blueprint for Apple's empire. The iPod didn't just dominate music. It trained consumers. It taught millions of people to trust Apple with their money, their data, and their daily habits. It normalized the idea that Apple devices cost more, and that paying more was reasonable. By the time the iPhone arrived in 2007, Apple didn't need to convince the world. The world was already conditioned. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone, but it was the first one that mattered. Apple didn't win because of specs. It won because it controlled the experience from the moment you touched the screen to the moment you upgraded. Every app, every animation, every restriction. Nothing was accidental. Even the App Store followed the same logic as the iTunes Store. Small transactions repeated endlessly inside a system Apple owned. $1 here, $2 there. Individually meaningless. Together, unstoppable. And this is where Apple's genius becomes clear. The company never chased cheap products. It chased cheap decisions. Decisions that felt small to the customer, but compounded into trillions over time. Hardware margins, software lock-in, services layered on top of devices people already owned. Each product fed the next, each dollar reinforced the ecosystem. By the time competitors tried to copy Apple's strategy, it was too late. The moat was already built. Apple's greatest strength has never been innovation alone. It's been retention. Once Apple gets a customer, it rarely lets go. The real money now came from what happened after the purchase. Services quietly moved to the center of the business. Apple Music, iCloud, the App Store, Apple Pay, Apple TV Plus, Fitness Plus, News Plus. Individually, none of these looked revolutionary. Together, they transformed Apple from a product company into a financial machine. Services revenue didn't depend on new devices. It depended on loyalty. And Apple had the most loyal customers in the world. This is where the $1 strategy reveals its full power. Apple understood something most companies never grasp. People resist big costs, but they ignore small ones. A phone upgrade every few years feels painful. A 99-cent charge barely registers. A $2.99 subscription feels harmless. A $9.99 service feels justified. Apple stacked these micro-decisions on top of each other until customers were spending hundreds of dollars a year without ever feeling like they were spending at all. And Apple took a cut of almost everything. Up to 30% from the App Store, monthly fees from services, accessories with margins higher than most tech products. Even repairs flowed back into the system. Every dollar circulated inside Apple's walls. Critics often argue that Apple products are overpriced. Apple doesn't disagree. That's the point. Premium pricing isn't about cost. It's about signal. Higher prices create commitment. Commitment creates identity. Identity creates loyalty. When someone buys an iPhone, they're not just buying a phone. They're buying into a standard, a design language, a lifestyle that says, this is how things should work. That emotional attachment is priceless. And Apple protects it aggressively. The ecosystem is designed to feel seamless until you try to leave. Messages turn green. Accessories stop working. Files don't sync the same way. Features quietly disappear. None of it is dramatic, but all of it is friction. Apple doesn't trap users with force. It traps them with convenience. Leaving feels like downgrade. Staying feels normal. Then came Apple Silicon. In one move, Apple broke free from Intel, cut costs, improved performance, and tightened control over its devices even further. Macs became faster. Batteries lasted longer. Software ran smoother. But more importantly, Apple reduced dependency. Vertical integration, once considered risky, became Apple's greatest advantage. While competitors scrambled through supply chain disruptions, Apple absorbed the shock. While others fought margins, Apple expanded them. By 2022, Apple crossed a line no company had ever crossed before. A $3 trillion valuation, not from one product, not from one breakthrough, but from decades of discipline. Apple never chased trends. It shaped habits. It never sold cheap devices. It sold cheap decisions. It didn't win by being first. It won by being consistent. That's why Apple doesn't panic during market crashes. It doesn't overreact to competition. It doesn't chase every new technology, because Apple isn't playing the same game. It's playing the long game. And that's the lesson most people miss. Apple's success wasn't built on genius moments. It was built on systems. Systems that reward patience. Systems that scale quietly. Systems where a dollar doesn't need to be impressive. It just needs to repeat, over and over, until the numbers become impossible to ignore. Apple didn't turn a $1 product into a $3 trillion empire overnight. It did it by understanding human behavior better than anyone else, by making spending feel effortless, by turning technology into habit, and by ensuring that once you entered its world, there was very little reason to leave. If you want to understand the future of business, you don't need to look at what Apple is building next. You need to look at what it's already mastered. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into the strategies behind the world's most powerful companies, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because the most valuable lessons in business aren't loud. They're quietly compounding.